Today's showcase will be moderated by Frank Rimalovsky. Frank is the founder and executive director of the NYU Entrepreneurial Institute, where he leads an executive director of the university's initiative to show support of entrepreneurship and technology. Frank is also the managing director of the NYU Innovation Venture Fund, a seed stage venture fund that is invested in 24 NYU startups. Frank has previously served as an instructor for NSF's I-Corps program, taught entrepreneurship courses at NYU Tandon and Courant, and served as a mentor at Techstars and on the advisory board for the Tufts Entrepreneurship Center. Frank, at this time, I'll pass it over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Alexandra. It is a treat to be here and to have four entrepreneurs that I know and love in a lot of ways, and some I've known for, I don't know, longer than I can remember in some ways. So it's really great to see these familiar faces here. I know you don't want to hear from me, you want to hear from them. So let's jump right into it. I'd first like to introduce Daniella Blanco. Daniella is the founder of Sunthetics, which she's going to tell you all about. So over to you, Daniella.
Yes, hello everyone. It's so nice to be here with you today. Let me make sure that I can share my screen real quick. All right, wonderful. So yes, as Frank was saying, my name is Daniella Blanco. I got my PhD in chemical engineering at NYU Tandon in May of 2020, and I am the co-founder and the CEO of Sunthetics, where we are accelerating innovation and sustainability in the chemical industry. Why did we get into this? Well, if we look around us in 2021, pretty much everything we see is made by the chemical industry. However, we don't often realize that although this industry gives us so many useful products, it has also become the third largest contributor to greenhouse gas emissions, releasing over 800 million tons of CO2 every single year. And with the consequences of climate change being more present than ever, more and more chemical companies are committing to changing their processes, to cutting on CO2 emissions and becoming more sustainable. But we need to ask ourselves, how do we really do that? Well, to become more sustainable, we need to first understand that emissions come from chemical processes when we transform a molecule A into a more useful molecule B. This process can sometimes be very inefficient and use fossil fuels as energy source, which constantly releases CO2 into the environment. The good news is that reports by the Department of Energy and others show that there is the potential for us to reduce the energy use and emissions by more than half. However, in order to do this, we need new ways to develop better processes. And why do I say this? Well, if we wanted to make this very process more sustainable, we would realize pretty fast that it's not so straightforward. In fact, if we think about making this new molecule in a sustainable way, we will probably have a chemist or an engineer who needs to figure out what is the right temperature, concentration, additive, voltage, and many other parameters that go into making that molecule in the most efficient way. Think of it as having to come up with the right recipe to make that molecule in a sustainable way. But what it really feels like is kind of having to recreate Gordon Ramsay's most famous risotto without any guide or recipe book. Unfortunately, the tools that we have available to help us in this process are often not performing adequately, or they have big barriers to implementation. But this is precisely where artificial intelligence can play a role. In fact, we can use artificial intelligence to make chemical processes that are innovative, more sustainable, more efficient, and less expensive. An opportunity truly so big that Accenture has also reported that by 2025, the digitalization of the chemical industry is expected to unlock a $500 billion market. However, if AI has so many advantages, then why is it that it hasn't been widely implemented in the industry to make it more sustainable? The answer is that AI normally requires big data. But collecting data in the chemical industry is extremely expensive and difficult. The truth is that we don't have that much data. So at Sunthetics, what we do is demonstrate that AI doesn't necessarily require big data. In fact, we have worked very hard to develop the first AI platform that uses small data to predict the behavior of chemical systems. We're working so that this platform, this true AI lab partner, is available to all chemists and engineers throughout our industry, where they can just upload a simple Excel file with information from their experiments, and with just one click, get a prediction of what the right recipe is to make that molecule or that new chemical in the most efficient and sustainable way. This is an easy to use tool where users do not need to have any background in engineering or AI or statistics to be able to use it. It is reaction agnostic and can be used in different types of chemical reactions, formulations, or the development of new products. It provides easy visualization, uses small data, and guides experimentation, ultimately enabling users to develop new processes and chemicals in 20% of the time. Now, I could keep telling you features about the tool, but instead what I want to do is show you what this type of technology can really do for a chemical company or an academic research group. I'm going to tell you the story of a company that piloted our technology in Indiana. They were developing a new chemical transformation and they wanted to make it more sustainable. So they were trying to find the right recipe for it. What they did was the campaign that we can see on the left. Each of these points is a different experiment that they did trying to find that recipe. And they were looking for a bright yellow that corresponds to a higher efficiency. Now, they did 39 experiments, and this point over here with a light green, that's the best point they found with an intermediate efficiency. Afterwards, they used our tool, and with only 9 experiments, they were able to find this yellow point on the corner with an unprecedented efficiency. The way that this worked is that they started with 5 random experiments that you can now see in black, and then our tool guided their experimentation, telling them what experiments to run next and leading them exactly to that true maximum. This comes from a prediction of how the entire system is behaving, and it shows that by using artificial intelligence, this company was able to first achieve unprecedented efficiencies, and they were also able to do this with 75% less experiments. What this means is that what originally took them 6 months to do on the left could have been done in only 6 weeks and a quarter of the salaries using our tool, as is shown on the right. This is made possible with a combination of machine learning and chemical engineering constraints that really target AI into chemical systems. We have piloted this technology with different companies and research groups, all the way from electrochemical reactions to the prediction of material properties. And we have consistently seen that users are able to develop these new processes or products using 70 to 80% less experiments. And what does this mean? Well, using 80% less experiments means that we need 80% less time, money, and resources. It means that companies can develop 5 times more chemicals, medicine, and new products at this rate. And it means that we can unlock efficiencies that could even help us save over 400 million tons of CO2 every single year. We're actually entering the market by the end of this year with the first version of our product, and we have some first paying customers from academia and industry, and we have an aggressive go-to-market strategy with which we're planning to reach our first 5,000 users and $50 million in revenue by 2025. Throughout this growth, our product is also going to evolve and improve in performance to help us target new sectors of the chemical industry. We are really relying on the tool being used both in academia and in industry to help us spread the use of AI in chemical research, process development, and also manufacturing. We're currently actually raising $1.5 million to get us to our first 500 platform users and the next version of our product. And all of this is really made possible by our incredible team. Sunthetics was actually co-founded all by NYU alumni and professors. And on the call today, I think we have Miguel Modestino. He's a professor at Tandon. He was also my PhD advisor, and he's a co-founder of Sunthetics. We have been able to raise $900,000, $650,000 of which were from non-dilutive grants and competitions. Our very first grant was actually from NYU, the 300K challenge. And our most recent grant is a phase 1 SBIR from the National Science Foundation for $250,000. We have been incredibly fortunate to have been featured on our work and vision by National Geographic, Forbes, the New York Times, the United Nations, and many others. And we look forward to continue growing because our journey has really been a story of a lot of changes, a lot of mistakes, but also growth. We actually started back in 2017 when I moved to the US to do a PhD in chemical engineering. On the left, you have Miguel and me on the labs at Tandon when we wanted to make solar powered chemicals. This reactor that you can see then on my hand on this picture, that's the first reactor that we made at NYU. And then at Sunthetics, we scaled that up to a reactor that is 250 times larger. And today, we work very hard to make sure that these reactors and reactors throughout our entire industry are paired with our AI platform so that they are as efficient and as sustainable as possible. Because our goal has really always been, and will continue to be, making the chemical industry more sustainable, one reaction at a time. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you, Danielle. That's terrific. It's great to see you. It's great to see Miguel as well, and the progress that you've made. You touched on it at the end there, and obviously I know more than the rest of the audience here is, but can you maybe just touch on how the original vision for Sunthetics came to be? What was the insight or inspiration for that, and what led to that evolution to where you are today?
Yes, of course. So Miguel's research group at NYU focuses on the use of renewable energy sources and electricity-driven chemical processes because they're more sustainable. I joined this lab really excited to work with him and work on this type of sustainable technologies. So we actually dedicated my thesis and the beginning of our research to make solar-powered chemicals. That's how Sunthetics was born, and our vision was really to make solar-powered nylon. We joined the Entrepreneurial Challenge at NYU and all the other competitions with this, pitch and this idea of what Sunthetics was going to become. That's also where the name comes from. But then as we did customer discovery, we realized that the market was pretty tough on the nylon business, that, solar powered chemicals were interesting, but that we needed to bring more into the equation. The chemical industry really needed benefits in cost, in efficiency, needed other types of savings. So we continue maturing our idea, changing it. And that's how we evolved all the way to where we are today, where we understand that in order to make solar powered and sustainable chemicals throughout the entire industry, not just in nylon, we need more than just a reactor or more than just one process. We need a tool that is driven by AI to make the overall industry more sustainable.
Great. You guys are really, I do a lot of things really well, but one of the things that continues to impress me is your ability to raise non-dilutive funding sources. We see entrepreneurs in the Leslie E Lab where I work every day coming in with an idea and thinking that they can raise venture capital for that, which is rarely, as I often will say, unless your name is Elon Musk, no one wants to write a check to see if you can figure out how to build it, let alone if the market wants it. So what do you attribute that to? Because you guys are really exceptional at it. And I think it's been instrumental. You probably wouldn't be here today without all those non-dilutive funding sources. So maybe, from the standpoint of what advice can you share to other aspiring entrepreneurs about how to fund their vision when it really is raw and early at the beginning and probably not even ready for, professional investors?
Yes, definitely. In our case, I would say that our success is definitely thanks to you, to the Leslie E Lab, to Miguel.
I wasn't fishing for a compliment. I wasn't fishing for a compliment.
No, but it is true, because if you think about it, we didn't have any background in business. We didn't know anything. Like, I don't know if you remember, Frank, but I remember the first time we walked into Leslie E Lab, I didn't even know what revenue model meant. Like, I didn't know the difference between revenue and profit. I didn't know anything. So, we were very lucky to get so many mentors and so many people willing to look at our material, to give us feedback. And then I think it was a process of learning how to listen to that feedback. At the end, I feel like this market and the market for many other companies is unknown. Nobody truly knows what's going to happen, and nobody has the clear answer on how to fix things. But as you listen to different points of view, you can learn, what people are saying. You can learn the little thing that they can add, and then you put together an actual idea of how to move forward. we changed our vision so many times, and we have learned so much from our market and our mentors because we have been willing to listen. So I mean, I look back at one of our pitches when we were starting, and it's crazy how much we have changed. It's crazy how much we have evolved, but it's really thanks to that. I would say that we have never been just stuck or too in love with one idea to not be willing to change and learn more to actually make it into the market. So, in our case, the non-dilutive funding came mostly from competitions, and this was key. If we hadn't listened to mentors, if we hadn't been willing to learn and to adapt and to see what people were looking for, we would have never won. I think that it's important to know that in addition to, like the competitions where you really have like one winner that takes the money, there are also programs at NYU. There's a summer launchpad, there's Venture Well. There are many programs that you can apply to when you're a student, and that will give you maybe smaller amounts of funding, but they're still, important, and they can make a difference in you showing a prototype or testing your idea.
Terrific. By the way, I meant to say earlier, if anyone has questions, just you can put them in the chat or raise your hand and share your. Here, Ruby, someone else I know has a question here. What was behind the decision to receive non-dilutive funding versus equity? What about your business model invites more grant funding? Thank you, Ruby.
Yes, thank you for the question. In our case, we were figuring so many things out that it didn't really make sense to take equity money at first, because as Frank was saying, we still had to even prove that it was going to work. So we didn't want to get diluted and be like focused on just one idea when we still wanted to change. I think that the big decision between grant funding and equity funding comes to really the timeline that you have. Grants are wonderful. They don't take equity, they allow you to grow, but sometimes you do have it linked to specific, research tasks, and you might need money for something else that's not covered by the grant. Or sometimes, the grants take longer. In our case for NSF, with COVID and everything, the timelines were delayed. So you have to really balance out. If you need money now and you need it for certain types of activities that are not covered with typical research grants, then you might want to go for the equity route. I would say that as long as you can really leverage the non-dilutive funding, go for it, because it's really going to allow you to grow your company and grow your team and learn how to do things and adapt without losing equity too early in the journey.
I think that's great feedback. All right, we have one more question. How did you decide to do this? Most successful entrepreneurs I know worked at big companies, observed an opportunity due to their position's exposure, and then left the company to launch a startup. Is that your situation, or did you wake up one day and say, I'm going to do this particular thing? Thank you for that question, Bradley.
Yes, thank you for the question. I think it was more that I didn't know this was going to happen, to be honest. I came here to do a PhD because I knew that I wanted to develop more sustainable technologies for industry, but I always thought I was just going to graduate and go into industry and hopefully work in a department or in a company where I could work in sustainable initiatives. Now, when I joined Miguel's lab and we had this grants and we were doing the research on solar power nylon, we looked a lot into what would happen if this is implemented outside just a research lab. And that idea kind of like started getting into our heads of, maybe we can make a company and make sure that we can commercialize this type of technology. We joined the competitions at the Leslie E Lab really with the goal of kind of strategically loosen. We wanted to learn and see, what could be out there. Could this really be an idea that has a commercial value? And I think we were all incredibly surprised when we got the money and then we had to incorporate. So we became a company without knowing that it was truly going to happen. And after that, I guess, the ride just took us through it, because it's a difficult decision to take, especially when you're an immigrant and you're a student. Sometimes you don't necessarily have the safety net and you do need an income source. And a startup is a risky decision. There's a lot of uncertainty that is associated with it. So it was not necessarily the easiest decision, but I will say that at least in my case, I am in love with what I'm doing. I truly believe in the goal of where we're going. And I am more than grateful for the opportunity to be fighting for this dream every single day. So if it's something that you're truly in love with, I would say give it a chance for sure.
I think that's great advice, Daniela. And let me give a plug. We're out of time for Sunthetics, but I'd encourage you, if you are Disney Plus subscribers, to watch Own the Room and see Daniela steal the show, literally and figuratively speaking. It's a great documentary about the global startup competition. Was that the name of the
Global Student Entrepreneur Awards.
Global Student Entrepreneur Awards. Spoiler alert, but check it out. Thank you, Daniela. Great to see you. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Next up, Berta Jimenez, co-founder of Rise. Berta, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Frank. Let me also share my presentation so you can. So yeah, I'm Berta Jimenez. I'm the co-founder of Rise Products, and what we do is that we innovate food for a new era. So a little bit about my background. I have my PhD from NYU. I came in 2009, and I was trying to understand the role of higher education in developing entrepreneurs. And while I was doing this, I just met so many amazing people, and finally I came to a competition of global idea exchange when kind of like this whole story was formed. But before that, let me just take you a little bit back to tell you a little bit more about my story. So the concept that I've been always fascinated is this concept called industrial symbiosis. Industrial symbiosis is how the byproduct of an industry can become the raw material of another industry. And I learned this concept, I think, intuitively since I was a little child. But like when I started studying mechanical engineering, I learned the concept and then I saw it applied. So anyway, that's me. I'm like really little in my grandma's farm, and I was like just looking how like everything, like how like in our countries or in my household, like like there was like this banana plants, and they would use like the leaves, of course the banana, the flowers, every single piece of the banana. So it was like nothing was waste. Everything has some sort of resource. And then I came. I'm the middle child of a family of 5. Both of my parents are engineers. My brother is also an engineer. Well, my sister Betraya, she studied medicine. And then I just also decided to become an engineer. Here I'm like doing some labs and as a mechanical engineer. And then I started going through my sustainability journey from more of a technical point of view. The first job I got was in an environmental consulting company. And here you can see me like, I got so many different samples from like soil emissions. I climbed that chimney. But the thing that really, I guess like impressed me or provokes my thoughts was one time when I went with my boss at that time. She's a chemical engineer. And because I was the junior engineer, she would take me everywhere to collect samples of waste of everything. So we went to this fish packaging facility. They will take tilapia, they will take out the skin, take out the spines, they will take out everything, and then they will pack it and sell. It was an export business. So when she asked, how do you manage waste? They told her, we don't have any waste. And we're like, no, you have. We just saw you taking out the skin of the tilapia, taking out everything, and it's just like a fillet right now. So they said like, no, because the way we do it is we collect this and then we sell it to a Florida gelatin factory. So we don't have any waste. And I just thought like, oh my God, that's industrial symbiosis in action. And I thought it was like really fascinating. And I asked Noemi so many questions about these things, like, is this a best practice? Because every company does the same thing. And then she told me like, unfortunately not. And I just thought, I hope someday somebody could do something about, making industrial symbiosis a reality everywhere. Anyway, I came to New York to do my PhD. And I just like, there were so many beautiful nature parks and the contrast of the waste, which it's ugly. And it's just so much of it. And so sometimes I think like when I was living in Ecuador with my family and two people that come and help, and we have two dogs, we will create less waste than me and my roommate, two of us living in New York City. So when the university, as I told you, like I was trying to understand competitions and co-curricular programs to develop entrepreneurs, they put this question of how we can make cities better. And I was like, I know how, with industrial symbiosis. I didn't know how to apply it. I just knew that that was a concept that needs to be implemented. So anyway, I applied to the competition. That's when I think I met Frank, or probably I met him a little bit before. And went to Shanghai. And from like fostering industrial symbiosis, we were trying to create something more tangible. And we thought first that the marketplace was a solution until we met our first potential customer, and he just destroyed our vision because he was like, what can I do with just 5 products, you know, like, and then we eventually became rice. We found our fish industry, which was beer. And in beer, there's something called spent grain. Spent grain is just malted barley that has been boiled and crushed. And it leaves behind this like amazing grain that has a lot of like nutrition, great flavors. But if it's thrown, like there's like a lot of this grain that's created is 42 million tons, and it has a cost associated on disposing it. But if we could convert this into something useful like food, we could feed up to 400 million people per year. And that's really important for me because that's the population of South America, where I'm from. So then we decided like, okay, let's make this problem into something useful. We created a flour. We have a process. We use gentle dehydration to preserve all the flavors, all the nutritions, so we can create food out of this. And this is a flour. It's really rich, has 12 times the fibers, 1/3 of the carbohydrates, 2 times the protein. And what I really love is like augment the shelf life of anything that you use. So if you have a cookie that only lasts 1 month, our flour will last a month and a half. And yes, that's our hero product, but we also are working with new growth products, especially like our baking mixes. And we have already diverted like tons of waste. We have created jobs, donated food, reduced greenhouse gases. And we are currently in the upcycling flour market, which is still a niche market. But where we want to go is to the functional flour market. It's a much bigger market. And the functional flour means like basically what flour will give you something extra than all-purpose flour, and that's where we are right now. And this is a market we're trying to enter. We already have a few business success, like with the B2B. Companies have already like buy like a lot of like flour from us. Even like we have even sell our flour to the best chef in the world that is in Osteria Francescana. And we have worked with food manufacturers. And right now we are trying to enter the B2C market. We are already talking with like some of the retailers, and we are also talking with the distribution at Kehi. It's the largest food distributor for specialty foods. But what is like has really helped us also, it's like the partners we have. First, like NYU was really an early backer and it was great, but we also have a strategic alliance with AB InBev, which is the biggest brewery in the entire world. We are working very closely with NYSERDA, and we have some investors. Yeah, and gladly our efforts have not been unnoticed. We have appeared in the New York Times, in CBS. I have spoken at National Geographic. And we have won awards, international awards in Milan, like trending topics in fancy food in New York City. But I couldn't have done this without my team. I have an amazing team. Ashwin is also from NYU. He did his PhD as well as like mine in technology management, but he's more into Operations is more my number person. Anna, she's a chef. Edgar, who has helped us with all the design. Our advisors, Sean has helped with over 100 food brands with business development. Andrea, she is helping with the growth, strategic growth of our company. Edward, who has over 30 years of stock market and finance. And Carl, who is the retired VP of PepsiCo. So yeah, this is not just about the story, but this is how we can make a difference when we think, of processes in a different way, when we kind of like come up with kind of what we have learned. Sometimes we know so many things since we are little, like sometimes we can take our culture and just see things in a different way. So yeah, thank you so much for your time.
That's terrific, Berta. It's also amazing to see the growth and the progress. So happy for you and Ashwin and the rest of the team. Well, when you and I first met, you mentioned this in Shanghai, you had this broader vision of what RISE was going to be, and it was an acronym and all that, and you kind of touched on it, but I think there's a really valuable lesson for a lot of entrepreneurs there. And if I could shorthand it, but then ask you to fill in some more details, you had a very big and broad vision, but you were trying to solve a lot of problems for a lot of people. And I think, where you ultimately pivoted is you found who had kind of, as we like in our language, a hair on fire problem. And you were able to identify a solution to that's taking off. So can you maybe talk a little bit about why the original instance of RISE didn't work, for lack of a better term, and what was the insight that you saw that said, spent grain from brewers and flour was the solution?
Yeah, great question. So as I told you, like I was really enamored, and I still believe so much in this concept of industrial symbiosis. And yes, we have like a really nerdy acronym of what RISE means. So we were trying just to solve like industrial symbiosis, for everyone, all the industries, could work, together, and everybody can get like value from their byproducts. So when we start trying to solve this, we were like the best place maybe could be a marketplace, because maybe one of the reasons that people don't know about byproducts is because it's not so common. Like people think of beer, they never think of like what are the ingredients, what is the process, what it's left. So we thought like maybe it's like the fact that people don't know this is the fact that people are not using them. So we were like, oh, it could be beer, or it could be like glass. We kind of like start trying to map out what are the different industries in New York State. And then we kind of like said like, okay, let's just be New York City. And we really thought like the solution was a marketplace where people will learn about each other byproducts. What we were not considering too much was like these byproducts, because they're byproducts, they have a shelf life that's very small. So they only have like 8 to 12 hours of shelf life. So it's like just moving a problem, we're not giving a solution. So we have talked with investors, we have talked with people like beer brewers. We took a while to talk with the baker or the chef. And that was a big mistake, because everybody, of course, they also like, oh my God, that sounds like really cool. Like, yeah, of course, you're gonna monetize waste. That's really cool. The problem was like, because we only thought it was like exchanging byproducts. When we went to this first baker, I still like remember, we went with like a bucket of spent grain, and he was like, are you trying to contaminate my kitchen? He was like, take that out. And
well, good thing you didn't bring fish scales.
Yeah, no, I didn't.
And by the way, I'm never eating Jell-O again. Thank you.
I ruined your yellow. I will ruin all your food if you want me to. But anyway, like we came with this bucket and he just like then I think he felt a little bad. He smelled it. He said like actually like the smell's not that bad, but I think you should probably like feed it to the pigs or grow mushrooms or use it as an isolation material. And it's like it hurts, it hurts because you think like you're doing something right. But the things like after that we were like, and he was really harsh with us, but maybe that was something that we need to hear. And then when we start thinking like why he hated so much, the problem was like we have like just changed hands with a problem, like we haven't done anything to we were just trying to exchange information, which it's good, but there's more than that, we start doing a lot of prototypes with like I'm a mechanical engineer and my Ashwin is also a mechanical engineer, but so like prototypes is our terrain, and we did like stuff like soap, food, construction material. We did everything we have in our toolbox. And then we decided that actually like the food market was the best one. And then when we put like, we got a little bit of money from a green grant from NYU, and we put a dinner together, and then people were actually tasting it. And actually that's when we found our first investor. And then we also find our first client also during like that prototyping part. Because like then we were really adding value. It wasn't just like exchange of materials, exchange of hands. There was a problem with the format, a problem with like, the shelf. Like there were so many problems because we were not considering our end user.
And I guess at what point did you realize and how did you realize that this was a scalable business, that this was not just an opportunity for one baker, but what kind of gave you the confidence to really go all in on the specs? I remember early on, you kind of knew that the supply was not the problem.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
A lot of brewers have a lot of leftover spent grain.
I guess like the more and more I talk with different people, and I also kind of understood my target market, because like I'm not the person, like if I go and talk with a traditional baker, it's really, he or she is really traditional. So they're not gonna change any of the recipes, and then but at the beginning I talked with everybody, and then once we started hearing more, people started trying it, they were like saying like how much they like it, and like even like people from the Food Network really like it. We start hearing bigger names and more people interested. Kellogg's wanted, like names like that. We're like, okay, maybe we are in the right track. And yeah, I think that's the point where we realized like, I think we are going, the correct way. But yeah, but like we also knew, what we have to correct, what were like the things that we have to switch a little bit, but it was like from the market, like we start getting better feedback than the feed it to the pigs. So
firsthand validation. It wasn't some research report or anything like that.
No.
Great. Any other questions? We're almost out of time, but we probably have time for one more question from the audience. If someone has one, either unmute or turn on your video, whatever you like. Anyone? No? All right. Oh, yes. Sorry, Frank. How could I miss Frank? You're muted, Frank.
I'm trying to
Alexander.
unmute. Okay,
There
here
you
I am.
go.
I'm unmuted. No, I'm interested in all the entrepreneurs. I'm trying to think of what would, if you had to describe the best type of mentorship at different stages of your development, what would be the best type of mentorship? You're talking primarily, are you thinking of a technical person, for example, or someone who's been through failures, who can guide you through how to get away from how to get over a failure and develop things in a more productive way, what would be the best idea for you as a mentor? How would you describe them?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question. Actually, like I have a number of mentors, some that have been more inspirational, that when you are like, feeling down and they are like, what, I have gone through that, and that have been really helpful. And I think they're helpful during all your stages, because like sometimes you win, sometimes you lose.
That's right.
And they have been really helpful. But like I think, for instance, like like more specialized mentors like Carl from PepsiCo, it probably was better when we were already have a little bit of a scalability issue rather than the beginning, because we were still kind of experimenting. So I think those type of mentors are great when you're trying to grow your company, make it into something more sustainable, more scalable. At the beginning, I'm sure like he has like tons of experience, and he could have given us a lot of feedback on the I guess inspiration part. But I think like the mentors that help you inspire, help you push, are really great in all the stages. Mentors are a little bit more specialized in a particular thing, like operations or finance or those stuff. They are great, but once have at least, at the beginning, I was like, I want to foster industrial symbiosis. It was just like such a big problem, like big concern at this abstract concept, that I really needed someone, or maybe like somebody with a business like background, like, like when I went to Shanghai, I have a couple mentors. That's where I met Frank, and it was like how we can make this scene, how we can like make this concrete, so it's more like that.
Thank you so much, Berta. Really appreciate it. That was fantastic. Thank you for your time and your presentation and your answers. All right, next. Oh, our pleasure. Next up, Jasmine. Tell us all.
Hi, everyone. Will do. Yeah, thanks very much for the invitation to speak today. I don't know if this is by design, but like actually where I fall in the sequence of today is like really perfect, because Daniella touched on using machine learning to develop new technologies in the chemical space. Bertha also introduced us to the needs in the ingredient space. Shiru is actually a company that's using machine learning as well as precision fermentation to actually create new ingredients that are protein-based. So I'm excited to tell you all a little bit more about that. And right before I do, Frank, just hold off on the thought of never eating Jell-O again. Just give it a couple of years, because we're going to be making Jell-O and all these great products without gelatin, without these ingredients that give you kind of like an X factor.
All right, you'll have to send me a sample.
For sure. So my company is called Shiru. Shiru means in Chinese actually looks like meat, but it refers to mushrooms. So we thought that was a great kind of play on something that's not animal-based, representing something that is. At a high level, what we do at Shiru is basically we create a new toolbox of more sustainable protein ingredients for food CPG companies that actually develop the products that the retailer ends up buying in the supermarket, to be able to create foods that essentially don't rely on ingredients that we currently derive from animals. So replacing things like dairy proteins, egg proteins, gelatin, but also non-animal ingredients as well, but things that really have a disastrous effect on the environment. So including in there things like unsustainable palm oil or coconut oil. So at Shiru, we actually leverage really state-of-the-art technology from a couple of different areas to be able to find the proteins that are really most functional in performing certain jobs within a food context, meaning that these proteins either emulsify really well, mixing oil and water, or they gel, or they're very soluble, but essentially they're biomolecules that perform a job in a food context. We just happen to find the best proteins by using machine learning as well as bioinformatics. And then we leverage precision fermentation. So basically microorganisms like yeast to be able to make those specific high value proteins as ingredients to deliver them to the market. In the next couple of minutes, I don't have any slides, but I'd rather just use the time to kind of give you a little bit of background. First of all, on me, who am I? Why am I doing this? Why am I talking to you guys? And then a little bit of history on the company, more on the technology, and also on the business model side of things and like where we are. So just kind of taking a step back, I am an NYU Tandon alum. I have my PhD in materials chemistry. I studied protein engineering. That was what my thesis was in. I graduated in 2015. During the time that I was at NYU, I think even when I started the graduate program, and this is maybe dissimilar to many folks who are kind of in PhD programs, I knew from the beginning that it was not my objective to be an academic professor. I really wanted to get a strong footing on the technology side to basically go into industry and kind of use those skills commercially. And so towards that end, there were a couple of things that I did during my time at NYU that, I wanted to learn outside of the lab how technology can be commercialized. So at the time I started a company which was called Bench Pals. So this Shiru is actually my second company. And that's where I met Frank. We participated in, I think this is the first cohort actually of NYU Summer Launchpad.
It was.
Yeah. So we were kind of guinea pigs, but then we had no idea what we were doing. So it was all great fun, just learning in that over that summer. But really that experience opened up my eyes to what it meant to actually commercialize an idea and take things out of the lab and do kind of customer validation and like all of the hard work of pounding the pavement to validate that your idea, that there's something there. So we got a bit of excitement and learnings there. Ultimately, we were, me and my co-founders were like year 4 of our PhD. So we decided that we were going to finish the program and then figure out what we wanted to do. But it gave me a great opportunity to find out about entrepreneurship, and then also led me to the following summer work at a VC firm, which is called Lux Capital in New York City. Fast forward a couple of years, Lux Capital ended up leading Shiru's seed round. So that kind of came full circle. After the PhD, I moved out to California, worked in a company that was really leading the space in kind of plant-based foods called Hampton Creek at the time. So I worked there for about 3 years, was a research director there. And it led me to start Shiru ultimately. So I started the company in 2019. We got our kickstart by going through the Y Combinator accelerator program out in Silicon Valley. And so, pluses and minuses of that experience, but it was really, really good for helping me learn how to fundraise essentially. So how to get, an idea that was very much on paper into something that was kind of something we could prove and discuss with investors in a really serious way. So that's a little bit about the kind of the history of the company. We're based over in the Bay Area in California. So the company is now a little bit over 2 years old. We closed our seed round at the end of 2019, which was $3.5 million. Went on to raise our Series A this year. And so we're kind of still in stealth mode. We've been very heads down building out the technology and the business, but our Series A was $17 million. So we closed that in May of this year and continued to grow the company since. So a little bit more on like exactly what we're doing. So really, if you've ever tried an Impossible Burger or maybe a plant-based cheese product, there's probably a lot of sensations that you have when eating these foods. If you've tried some of these more new like plant-based cheeses, you're probably recognizing that it doesn't remind you of like the brie that you've always loved and known. Really what it comes down to are actually the basic ingredients that folks use in making these foods. And so at Shiru, our mission is really to create a better palette of ingredients that enable food manufacturers at very large scale to move away from ingredients that have a much bigger footprint on the environment. That really, if you're reaching for a bag of Doritos, let's say, you're not necessarily eating that food product because you want to consume dairy protein. You're just grabbing a snack. And so the dairy protein is a really functional ingredient there. It binds things together, it carries flavor. But at Shiru, we are basically making ingredients that can do exactly the same thing, but that have a much smaller environmental footprint, to the tune of like 97% less water for example, that's needed to make the ingredients that we produce via fermentation. At our core, we have a discovery platform. And so we use machine learning as well as precision biology to bring these ingredients to life. Our team today is 22 people, 10 of whom have PhDs in various areas of expertise that are needed to kind of really differentiate our technology offering in this space. In terms of the business model, so we see ourselves as an ingredients company, meaning that we are going to commercialize and develop ingredients that we sell to food manufacturers, large and small, globally. To do that, using fermentation, there's a lot of resources, CapEx, IP that goes into bringing those ingredients to market. And ultimately, it's a long time to commercialize ingredients to the tune of like 3 to 5 years. And so these are long timeframes when you think about really venture-backed companies and like reaching that scalability point. So along the way, in addition to kind of our North Star of actually selling ingredients on the market, we're also going to be licensing a lot of the IP or discoveries that we make along the way. And so the companies that we would license IP to are actually other ingredients companies that are kind of in desperate need for innovative solutions, but they already have the scale to be able to commercialize those things. I think just reflecting a little bit on, I guess, like my journey and the education that I received from NYU, both in the lab and out of the lab, I couldn't necessarily have predicted like exactly how applicable everything was, but like it really is. My PhD is in protein engineering, as I mentioned, and I spent 5 years producing functional proteins recombinantly in microorganisms, never having heard that food was possibly an application that it could have been applied to. I didn't even know food science was a discipline at all. And so, I didn't know the technical background that I had, and I loved doing the research, but it could be applied to something that just really felt like I finally had wind in my sails. Really, food is a tremendous space to be in, especially right now with all of the shifts towards plant-based eating. Like the time could not be better for a company like ours. And I happen to have a really good training in terms of how to realize these types of products. So I couldn't have predicted that, but very, very, very kind of fortuitous, combination there. So yeah, I'll stop there, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
That's awesome, Jasmine. It's great to see you and great to hear how well the business is doing. Could you maybe talk a little bit about maybe what it was, without compromising any non-disclosure agreements or your own intellectual property, but what it was that you saw when you were at Hampton Creek that kind of was the
Absolutely.
inspiration or aha moment, and what gave, kind of the same question I asked Bertha, is what gave you the confidence that there was a scalable business to be built
totally
around that insight?
Yeah, sure. So, I think the biggest insight that I had during my time there was the tremendous changes that are going on in the food industry right now. Food companies, large and small, are feeling big pushes from the consumer for foods that are better for people, better for the environment, and better for animals. They're looking at ingredients labels. They want to understand what's in their food. They want to have food that is accessible, that is economical, but also that they know where the food comes from, and it makes them feel good to purchase that and feed it to their families in a huge way. Hampton Creek, where I worked previously, that was a food CPG company in and of itself. And so we, produced products that were on supermarket shelves. So we felt that firsthand, but we also had a tremendous amount of inbound because we had an interesting technology platform there that all of these other food companies, from like Nestle to Ferrero, General Mills, Kellogg's, like all of the big folks were looking to companies that are on the innovation, kind of on the forefront of innovation, saying, hey, we need solutions here too. Hampton Creek, that was not their business model. So they were not going to partner with any of those companies. But I saw that, and I was fielding those requests from those companies and thought, oh my God, this is tremendous. A lot of the kind of excitement in the food tech space is about having consumer facing brands. And for me, as a technologist, as a scientist and engineer, I think that there are huge, maybe less sexy opportunities to transform the whole industry really from the bottom up. And that's what I see in terms of the opportunity to provide better ingredients to the entire ecosystem.
Got it. Awesome. There's a question here from Bradley. Bradley, you can unmute yourself if you want to ask it yourself.
Okay. Thank you, Frank, and pleasure to actually see you in person and get to meet you. So my question is, how do you find and vet these highly educated employees you have that make your business so incredibly successful?
Yeah, totally. In the early days, which we are definitely still in the early days, I spend, I would say like 60% of my time on the recruiting side of things. And I think that that's totally necessary for any entrepreneur who really cares about their business, both the success from like a technical milestone standpoint, but also the culture that you're trying to build. And so this is like really like me looking at competitors, looking at synthetic biology companies, food tech companies, just like cold messaging people on LinkedIn, quite frankly. That's how I've gotten in touch with a lot of people. Yes, we've used recruiters, but like really it was getting kind of the first couple of hires that had their own tremendous networks. And now it's kind of a snowball effect because you get these people who have worked in all of these really transformative companies. And now, they like working with us and they're like bringing people on board who they used to work with. In terms of vetting folks on the technical side of things, so I have a technical background, so some of it I could do myself. In the areas that I could not do myself, so like machine learning, for example, we leverage mentors. So we leverage advisors and mentors to be able to do that second phone screen and like really ask them technical questions to make sure that, there's really substance there in terms of the backgrounds that they have.
What about as a cultural fit?
Yeah, that's a really good one. Every company is going to have kind of different requirements of what they're looking for on this side of things. So it's all completely dependent on what you're building. But from our side of things, I mean, we really look to see kind of how people respond and how people are in situations that are ambiguous. You don't have perfect amount of information. At Shiru, we also really value humility. And so we don't tolerate brilliant jerks. We just don't. You can be as brilliant as you want, but if you're a jerk, you're not going to work here. And this comes with, spending time with candidates and talking with them and getting to know them and asking them hard questions. So it's, I think that the technical side of things, to be honest, it's like actually a lot easier to find people that are technically qualified. It's harder to find people that are both like excellent on the technical side and like really lovely people that you can solve big problems with.
Thank you.
Awesome. So speaking of, you just made me think of one thing. So, you've been at Shiru now, what, 3-4 years?
2.5.
2.5. So, well, what's been the biggest, right? It sounds like everything's going up and to the right, but I'm sure it's not always that
always.
So, what's been the biggest curveball or surprise or feedback or thing you've kind of learned along the way that maybe required a course correction, a pivot, or just doing something?
So there are a couple of things, Frank, honestly. First of all, I think I came into starting the business imagining that it was going to be really, really hard on the science side of things, just to like prove things out in the lab. Just to prove things out in the lab and like get those technical milestones checked off. I thought that would be like a really big challenge. Of course, it's not like super easy, but we haven't hit roadblocks there. What I underestimated was that we're innovating on a business model side of things. And that is like, it takes a lot of creative work to do that. It takes a lot of talking to your customers and like hours and hours and hours of like really strategic thinking there. So I underestimated like how much work we really needed to do on that side of things. The other thing that has been very difficult to kind of grasp as the industry is changing so rapidly is the scope of the opportunity. I tend to be pretty measured and like rational, and I'm like, oh yeah, I think there's a big opportunity here. Let's get some numbers and like, let's go for it. And then there are companies that just kind of come out of nowhere and they raise these mega rounds, and you look at what they're doing and you look at their milestones and you're like, holy cow, like they're no different than we are. Did I just massively undervalue my company? And for me personally, it's been an exercise, especially over the past 6 months, to like push myself out of my comfort zone and like not always talk so rationally, talk about the big picture, talk about the global market, talk about the opportunity, and talk as if you're already there. It's really hard. Like for me personally, that's like a really hard thing, but I think to be successful as a CEO and entrepreneur, you have to be comfortable doing that.
Awesome. Great stuff. Jasmine, it's so excited. I'm so excited for you. It's so great to
Thank
see you. I don't know when I'm coming out to California next, but if you find your way back to New York, please, it would be great to catch up with you in person.
We'll do, for sure. We'll do. Thank you.
All right. Thanks so much, Jasmine.
I'd like to congratulate Jasmine on her personality. I mean, that to me is amazing, that she has that calmness, that humility. She mentioned that's what she needs for the people, but that's exactly what it takes. It takes a group of people who are all together focused. They wash the latrine if they have to, but they'll still continue.
That's right.
To
Someone's got to do it. Yeah.
To be focused on what the team effort is, and you have the right personality. I tell you, I'm so impressed. So impressed.
Well,
Thanks,
right.
Frank.
And that's why we let her into Summer Launchpad all those years ago. We saw that in her. She's always been this way. Terrific. Great. Thank you, Jasmine. Thank you, Frank, for that comment. Joe, great to see you as well. Tell us all about what you're doing at Cressalon.
Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for taking the time and squeezing me in at the very end of this all. So my name is Joe Landolina. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Cressalon. We've been going at this for 11 years, if you can believe it, Frank. It's been a little while. So what I'm going to talk about today, I do have some slides that I'll bring up just to show some photos of what it is that we're working on and some of the new updates that we have. But before I pull those up, I'll just talk about my own background. So over the last 11 years, we took Cressalon, which was a dorm room NYU Tandon startup that was based on technology that I developed at the age of 17 and turned it into what is now the only aseptic biomanufacturer in the 5 boroughs of New York. We have about 50 employees. We've now been revenue generating for about a year. Next year should be our first year of full profitability. We're actually submitting for our first human approval this year, and we've done about 5 rounds of private financing, totaling just over $75 million to date. And it was a lot of that came in. And I know Frank's gotten a number of shout outs, but we started originally as a company in the Stern Business Plan competition and in innovation back at Tandon. A bit about my own background. I was a chemical engineering BSMS student at Tandon, but before that, I was lucky that my grandfather was a Hoffman LaRoche executive who, after he retired from Roche, decided to follow a second passion in life, which was wine. And as a result, I grew up on a vineyard with the chemistry lab across the street from my house and a grandfather who learned lab safety in the 60s. So that meant that from the time that I could walk, I was working in a lab alongside my grandfather. But my parents realized pretty early on that if they wanted a son with eyesight and all 10 fingers, they should probably send me somewhere to learn how to do research the right way. So I was lucky enough to, as a high school student, get into a summer research program at Columbia University doing tissue engineering. And I fell head over heels in love with the concept that you could take non-living materials or plant-based scaffolding and use that to grow human tissue. So being a young high schooler, I said, I'm going to go home and I'm going to grow cartilage in my family's winery. And needless to say, that process worked out horribly. And nothing worked. But what I stumbled onto at the end of that process was a blend of 2 polymers that come out of algae that immediately reassemble onto tissue or onto a wound if you put it on there. And the idea that I had was, what if you take a material like that and inject it into an actively bleeding bullet wound, so that at the very least you could take a patient who is bleeding out and who is most likely going to die, and you can stabilize them and bring them to the next level of care before, and so that you can get them treated and save a life. We entered the stirring competition with almost nothing more than that concept. We had some technology. We didn't really have much experimental data at that point. And this was in 2010. We won intervention. We took second place at the Stern Business Plan competition, which frankly is a surprise to me because again, as a 17-year-old, we were neither well spoken nor well put together at that point. But we realized by the end of that competition that we really had something, and that we had a decent market that we were trying to serve. And I will just give me 1 second here to bring up the slides. I will show a bit. Of what we're dealing with. So I think, unfortunately, I know it's almost dinner time for most people, but the thing that I love to do is there's one thing to talk about a product that stops bleeding. It's another thing to actually see what it looks like to stop bleeding, and then what the type of material that we're working on is. And so, go back here. Again, the problem is that even in present day, the best technologies on the market, whether we're talking in the surgical suite or we're talking on the battlefield, take several minutes of applied pressure. So if you're a soldier on a battlefield and you're injured and you're bleeding out profusely from an arterial bleed, it will take at least 5 minutes of applied pressure to stop bleeding. And if you look at the statistics that I have up, 91% of potentially survivable battlefield deaths relate to hemorrhage. So that means that they're only a better product that can stop bleeding. You can significantly save a number of lives or impact a number of lives. And especially when you look at time under anesthesia, every single second, every single minute that a patient spends under anesthesia in an operating room is additional risk that patient undertakes. And today, where the best product on the market takes 3 minutes to prepare and then 2 minutes of pressure to stop even minor bleeding, there's a significant need for something that can work much faster. We realized early on that we had some really interesting technology, and in short, it turns out that it was so novel that there wasn't another company in the world that could help us manufacture this. And Frank made fun of us in the beginning and laughed along with us as we were able to get it done. But we decided that we were going to first, and if you see my background, take over an old 1930s schoolhouse in the middle of Brooklyn and convert that into manufacturing space. And we proved that we could do it. And then after that, we made an investment in 25,000 square feet of clean room space to manufacture our products. And with this one technology, we're targeting 3 markets, the first of which is under the brand name Betagel. That's an animal health surgical device, followed by Trauma Gel, which is a military and emergency medicine product, followed after that by a surgical product. Altogether, these markets are relatively large, but allow us to actually get a significant early traction, early revenue. In fact, we have over 15% of the US vet market already registered as first users, and significant distribution contracts and a number of other pieces of traction. As you see in competition here, and we are head and shoulders above the competition. Where if you look at this product, or if you look at the products in the surgical market, and these are significant or manufactured by significant companies, and we have a 2 order of magnitude difference in our ability to stop bleeding. And that's all been helped along by quite a bit of media attention, as a number of the other founders today have mentioned. We were lucky enough to have been funded almost entirely by private individuals, our angel groups that came in back in 2013, 2014, reinvested. So the vast majority of that 75 million actually comes from the parties that led our seed round, that led our Series A, and so on, which was very helpful as a small company to be able to grow. And again, manufacturing, as the world starts to reopen, we've done events with NYU in the past. So if there's anyone who's interested in coming by and taking a tour, we love to give tours. This is, like I mentioned, a one of its kind, or the only manufacturing like this in the 5 boroughs of New York. And it really sets us it sets us apart in that we're able to control our own destiny. And one of the most exciting things for me is really being on the cusp of being able to execute our mission in the human space. So we've been selling our product into animal health now for about a year. It's been incredibly successful. We've been saving lives. We've been and changing the way that surgery is done. But with this submission that's coming up next quarter, it'll finally allow us to start getting closer to our original mission, which is the mission that we pitched to Frank 11 years ago. I still can't quite get my head around that. But being able to hopefully save a soldier's life on the battlefield, save a patient's life who's on blood thinner, or save someone who's on the operating table who's bleeding out. So with that, I'll pass it back over to Frank for questions.
That's awesome, Joe. Love hearing the story, and those videos are really compelling. I've seen the data before. I'm not sure I've seen the videos. So you just touched on something, so I think like some of the other ventures here, though I think your vision for where you are today was spot on from where you were going, but I think the path ended up being quite different. I don't think the first time that you presented the veterinarian market was in your sights. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that part of the journey and what led to that, which with the benefit of hindsight, it makes perfect sense now, but I don't think you knew that back then.
Exactly. And in fact, it took us forever for investors to get on board with that concept as well. But I mean, when we originally came to or found this technology, our mind immediately went to military or battlefield use, the most traumatic bleeds. And I think we realized as we were going through the competition, I think the majority of pushback that we got was that it was a one product, one customer market behind a massive regulatory hurdle for a team of 17, 18, and 19-year-olds. It is a lot to bite off.
Isaac was the grizzled veteran back then, right?
Exactly. Yeah, he was the aged 19-year-old. And with that, we realized we were, I don't want to say lucky at all. So in 2012, we were at this crossroads where we realized that it was going to be very difficult for us to proceed if we wanted to have the U.S. military as our first customer. And Hurricane Sandy hit New York around the same time we were having these conversations. And one of my earliest employees was working for the Coney Island Aquarium, and they lost an animal due to a collapsed wall where they had no product that could stop bleeding. And he came to me and he said, "Listen, I've done a lot of work in the veterinary market. We think that, or I know for a fact that the technology that's being used was implemented there in 1947, and it hasn't changed since. And if there's a patient that's bleeding, it's pressure and a prayer. There's no technology here, and the regulatory burden is lower. Why don't we look at this?" So we used a decent portion of the money that we had on hand in 2012 to buy a booth at the American Veterinary Medical Association conference in San Diego. We flew out there and we spoke to 300 people, and all 300 people said that they would definitely buy our product if we brought it to market. We brought that back, and that mixed with our first patent application and our first data in animal showing that the product can actually stop bleeding. We were able to use that to raise our seed round, and Pressalon became an animal health company for that.
Awesome. Actually, I'm not sure I knew about the connection with Hurricane Sandy and the aquarium. That's interesting. Other question. We're almost out of time here. I want to have someone in the room have the last word. Frank, are you raising your hand for another question? You're
I am raising my hand because I'm very impressed at the idea that you mentioned, that you've got the same group of investors essentially reinvesting. To me, that's very impressive. Can you expand on that a little bit as to what does it take to do that? I mean, how much of the technology compromises as well as the business compromises that you have to go through to do that?
So if I knew how to replicate that, I'd probably be a fund manager right now. But we got very lucky. So in some of the media attention, we had around 3,000 investors reach out to us directly. And my co-founder was a student at the Stern School of Business, and he insisted that if we were going to put together a friends and family round from people who found us on Facebook or found us on in the media some way and reached out to us, that he really wanted to develop a relationship with each and every investor. So we personally interviewed every single investor that reached out to us, and just like Jasmine was talking about the importance of finding fit with employees, it's equally important to do that with investors. And actually, at that point, we didn't select investors because of their ability to reinvest. I wish we had known that in the beginning. It was just, we were pleasantly surprised. And what we found was that investors that wrote six-figure checks into our Series A or into our seed round re-upped with seven-figure checks in subsequent rounds. And some of those investors re-upped with eight-figure checks as time went on. And I think one thing that we've always tried to do is be as transparent and communicative as possible with our investor group. And I know that that's been appreciated because as Frank alluded to, it's not always up and to the right. We've definitely had our share of difficulties, especially when you're trying to, maybe launch a product during a global pandemic or launch the first biomanufacturing site in Brooklyn since Pfizer shut their site down about 20 years ago. So we've seen our fair share of challenges, and we've been very lucky that we have the support of our investor base through it.
Very impressive. Very impressive.
Awesome. Well, I think that's all we have time for. Before we sign off, let me say thank you to Joe, Jasmine, Berta, and who am I forgetting? Daniella, who has actually signed off because she needed to rest her legs from a medical procedure, but she's fine. But thank you guys all. This is so impressive. I'm so proud to be a part of this, and lucky to have this audience here to share and learn from your insights. And with that, I will hand it back to Alexandra.
Yes, this concludes our program. Please consider joining us for the second part of our Tandon Alumni Showcase on Friday from 12 to 1 p.m. We thank you all for your participation and enjoy the remainder of your evening.
Thank you all. Take care. Joe, I will follow up.